Hi everyone, welcome back. Oh my gosh, it feels like I've been away for a very long time, but I'm sure it hasn't been that long. So thank you for joining us again. And so we do have a special guest here today.
Hi everyone.
Yes. So I wanted to introduce Erica. How about maybe you could do a quick introduction about yourself and your role at KFAM?
Yeah, absolutely. So hi everyone. My name is Erica Park and I am here as the SAPC program manager for KFAM. So I run and manage the SAPC prevention education program here. And so, I run a small team and I work alongside a lot of the different departments here at KFAM to make sure that we bring events and activities, educational materials that revolve around substance abuse prevention education.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. And it actually worked out perfectly timing-wise because we reached over 500 subscribers on YouTube. Thank you so much, everyone. That just tells us that there is an interest in what we're sharing, the information that we are providing. So that is great motivation for us to keep doing what we're doing. So, but in honor of that, we are giving away, if you didn't see in the post, we are giving away, I'll bring up another one, 5 Owala bottles. They're very popular right now, and they're actually a SAPC promo item. So if you ever go to one of their events, you can ask them for an Owala bottle. So how do you join then to participate in this giveaway? In our chat room, we're going to be posting up a link to a Google Drive, and you just put in your information, and then we'll do a drawing afterward, after the live today, and we'll contact 5 winners. So hopefully you do that. And then as always, feel free to put in any questions you have in the chat room, and we'll get to it as I see them. So let's get to it. All right. What is SAPC? It's an acronym to us, right? But what is it?
So SAPC, spelled SAPC, is actually an acronym for Substance Abuse Prevention and Control. And it's actually a program that is brought over to us through the LA County's Department of Public Health.
Okay. So then what's the purpose? What's the overall, why do we have SAPC?
It's kind of dramatic, I know, but the mission ultimately is to kind of reduce the use of substances like marijuana, methamphetamine, opioids, as well as alcohol amongst youth and young adults in LA County. It's kind of a grand one, and it's pretty lofty too, but ultimately that is their goal.
Okay. So then what do you do within SAPC?
So, it's kind of hard to summarize because ultimately it covers so many different things. I would like to, before I kind of get into all the nitty gritty, I do kind of want to specify to, both you and also our viewers that what we do is prevention. It's not intervention.
Oh, okay.
So prevention basically is trying to make sure that we educate the public, right, on why substances are harmful, making sure that they're aware of the way that substances are advertised to them, so maybe their perception of it changes over time. And it also might mean finding ways to limit access to harmful substances, whether it's through policy changes, through the government, even like community networking, etc. In a perfect world, a program like ours won't exist someday. Because again, we're not here to necessarily stop people or from continuing to use. We want to stop them from using it even at the start. And so, again, in a perfect world, we wouldn't need to do these services.
Right.
But
if there wasn't a need.
Right, if there wasn't a need. However, there currently is, and so we're doing our best to kind of address it, and also, working very hard to make sure that the future generation has a better future.
So getting to them before it becomes a bigger issue.
Correct.
Seems like what it is. So
yes.
So I know you mentioned a couple of different substances in there. So what would you think is our biggest thing right now?
The biggest thing, it depends on which demographic you're kind of speaking to, because let's be honest, depending on what demographic you belong to, you might be more susceptible to certain substances. So I would say when you're, talking about children, and that's the group that I tend to primarily work with, so anywhere from middle school to, say, university. Around that time, most of the time, the access you have the easiest access you have is to marijuana and alcohol. That's why they're much easier to abuse. However, for harder substances, say, and that are much more addictive, methamphetamines, fentanyl, those are realistically more accessible and most commonly used by people who are a lot older.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so when you say big, I'm going to just kind of frame it for my own reference of like, with the people we work with, typically it does tend to be marijuana, alcohol, vape pens.
Oh.
Yeah, vaping also we do consider a harmful substance. And actually, through the other providers I work with, through the other nonprofits I work with, through this program, we've been hearing increased uses of nitrous oxide. So yeah, like whippets, I think is sometimes what they're called.
I just saw actually a news clip about a college TikToker that was breathing in the keyboard cleaners.
Yeah.
Is that kind of similar to
It's
that?
not quite the same substance, but it kind of falls in the same category of inhalants. There's a lot of different things that people will, I think the slang term is often called huffing, the way that you ingest it. But there's just so many different chemicals that kind of produce similar effects to your brain or, kind of induces the same feeling. So that might be one. But again, nitrous oxide, I think, again, it's very easily accessible because we have nitrous oxide in so many things, right? And just kids are able to access it, use it, and they enjoy the experience of the brief momentary high. And yeah, it's kind of easy to hide from parents as well,
because it's just everyday items. Is that...
Kind of. I mean, so nitrous oxide is something. The way I often saw it would be, baristas when they're whipping cream. What they do is they put the cream inside a canister and then they have an extra nitrous oxide capsule that they attach to it so that when they spray it out, it combines with that gas to create that whipped foamy effect, right?
Okay.
And so what they'll do is they'll take the capsules and they're very easy. They're only about this big, truly, that big. So you can hide that anywhere, really.
So this is not an instructional video?
Oh, yeah, by the way.
This is just something for parents to keep an eye on because they can look like everyday items. Sometimes you want to keep an extra closer look at why do they have that? It kind of probably. Yeah. I was afraid we were going too instructional on that. So let's go back.
No, yeah, exactly. Oops.
So I know that you work a lot with kids and the community with our community partners and schools and stuff like that. So are there kind of certain topics or themes that come up often regarding substance abuse then?
Yeah, absolutely. I will say again, sort of a situation where it depends on who you're speaking with. So with the students themselves, a big question is often what are the harms of these substances? I think the way that we kind of advertise or the way that we've become accustomed to advertising of substances like marijuana, alcohol particularly too, I think it really shows only the highlights, but not necessarily the harms, right, of substances. The highlights, so almost kind of the lifestyle you might be able to achieve if you start using these substances, who will take notice of you, right? And it's almost like a lifestyle in a way that it's advertised, right? And I think people are I think kids are kind of swayed by, they almost want to think that it's it could be a normal part of my life, right? But again, they don't kind of realize the harms, right? Maybe one can argue there are some benefits to some of these substances, but I think that the harms greatly outweigh them, honestly, especially if you use it irresponsibly and not with a lot of education behind it. And so for a lot of these kids, it's been kind of amazing to see how their perception changes when you sort of remove all the lights and the glitter of these substances. I remember I was doing a presentation at a high school and I was actually going over the dangers of vaping. Let's be real, vape pens are pretty common to find, right?
I see them everywhere.
Honestly, I feel with some of these students, they might even see their own parents using it too, right? So when I told them about E-Valley, which is actually a lung-related complication to using cheap vape pens, so many of them were shocked that you could even get hurt, right? We've had enough time to properly talk about the dangers of tobacco, really expose the harms it does. We haven't had enough time for vape pens.
Right, because they're fairly not new, but they haven't been around as long as traditional
I mean,
cigarettes.
I would argue, like, truly, they've only really come into, like, our, periphery probably in the last, like, 10 years or so, really.
Yeah.
And so, a lot, and they're also seen, again, it's like the lifestyle thing. They're seen as, like, trendy, cute, small, right?
And they're flavored.
And they're flavored on top of it.
Which is probably a very good tactic to try to get kids addicted to it. So,
Absolutely.
is there an age limit to purchasing vapes? I'm not familiar. I'm not familiar.
So
with that.
for vapes, I believe they're probably under the same limitations as cigarettes. So probably 18 years old. Yeah. However, it's actually a fun, interesting thing. A lot of kids were so shocked to find out you had to be 21 to purchase marijuana. They knew automatically that, alcohol, yes, definitely, you have to be 21. Marijuana, they're like, you can't get that when you're 18. Stunned. I was, I found myself kind of just staring at them too. I was like, you guys don't know this? You guys don't know this?
Well, I guess I didn't know it either.
Yeah.
Again, I'm not buying marijuana, but
Yeah, I do want to stress, I'm not trying to shame anything or anyone for not knowing any better. I would say that probably health education has changed a lot in the United States, and so that might be the reason why perhaps the stuff isn't as, immediate, right?
Yeah.
Like for me, I'm thinking, yeah, of course, but I'm also a lot older than some of these, like, high school kids. Like, I'm at least like 10 years older by now.
Right.
So at this point, it is kind of up to the community to find their own education and hope that they come across the correct one.
Okay. I do have a question
Yeah.
here, kind of in what we were talking about. So 요새 아이들이 펜타닐을 쉽게 접할 수 있는데 어떻게 막을 수 있을까요? So the question is asking about kids are able to get fentanyl. So is there something that they can do it to prevent that?
To prevent that, so I have heard of many different ways that kids are able to access fentanyl, especially through online purchases.
Really?
And that's the part where it's a little bit more dangerous, definitely. I've heard stories of children, like especially during the pandemic when they were all locked in on social media, right? Getting, through their algorithm, accounts of people actually straight up selling, fentanyl or drugs, but maybe not disclosing that it's fentanyl. They just think it might be some kind of like less harmful substance, right? They order, but then they accidentally overdose because fentanyl, it's so easy to overdose on a very small amount. The margin of error is tiny. And I've heard a lot of tragedies that way. As for how to block it, when it comes to online stuff, obviously kind of understanding that your kid, like what they're accessing is a great first start.
Right.
And then also, kind of just making sure that there is some trust between you and your child so that if they encounter material like that, or maybe they have these like feelings that might drive them to searching out drugs, they can speak to you first rather than resorting to substances, right? But in other ways, so fentanyl is actually, it is a potentially, it's a prescription drug too. It's a painkiller. And so this is one of those things parents should really make sure that if they are prescribed like a very powerful painkiller like fentanyl, they got to keep that safe. They got to make sure that their kids can't just open a medicine cabinet and just like grab it, right? And so that is just like a more, I guess, perhaps an easier way of like making sure their kids can access it. Otherwise, again, a lot of it does come down to trust between you and your own child and you knowing what's going on in their life and kind of figuring out what's normal for them and what's not normal for them in their behavior.
So I know you talked about marijuana and alcohol being the two bigger substances that children will abuse. I guess to that then, Koreans.
Yes.
Koreans specifically, there is a saying I think in Korean that 술은 집에서 배워야 된다.
Yes.
So, I mean, you have to be 21 to purchase alcohol. So how are these kids getting the alcohol? Is it from the parents or is it from...
So, I mean, it depends on each culture, right? Some parents definitely might be a bit more permissive with their kids and maybe just if they have alcohol at home, they don't stop their kids from drinking it, right? Because maybe they're of the mindset, right? You just learn drinking from home first, it's safer that way. Other times, I mean, kids have a lot of different friends, and some friends might be older and actually 21 years old, so they might be purchasing alcohol, and then the younger, more underage children might be in the same environment as them, whether it's like a house party or even just spending time with them to any degree. That's how they might access it too. I think when it comes to alcohol, which is so readily available, right? It's not really controlled, right? The avenues of access there's a lot. You know, I don't know if I can summarize all of them, but those are the main ones I can think of if you have a child. Yeah.
So I think maybe the main point then is that it's probably going to be very difficult to prevent their access to alcohol, but maybe it's better to phrase it as to teach them the consequences of what can happen when you're abusing alcohol. Maybe?
I think that's actually a really good way of summarizing it, because yes, truly, we, at least for me, whenever I go out to my students or talk to parents about how to teach preventative techniques, right, towards their children, I do stress to them, you know, you can't stop everything.
Right.
And obviously, as children grow up and become more independent, sometimes experimenting with substances is a stage of their life that they encounter.
Unfortunately.
Unfortunately, no, it's true. But the truth is that, you know, we can't just be like, well, you're out of my life forever for even thinking about doing that, right? So what can you do to kind of make them think think twice about it, right? So sometimes that does mean, you know, teaching them to say no, because you're kind of teaching them, oh, you know, here are the harms too. But also, and this is something I really want parents to think about sometimes, is what are you doing for your child that will also help protect them from being even tempted to use like substances? It's not enough to just teach them, just say no, right? How would a kid say no if they're so stressed or anxious that maybe they feel like the substance is something that can give them a little bit of relief, right? How do they say no, right? How do kids say no if, say, they don't feel safe at home? They feel really anxious at home. They feel safer with friends who might be using these substances, and so they do it to fit in, right? I think that there are so many reasons why, you know, kids, students start experimenting, and I think sometimes, especially with parents who are from other cultures, they might really chalk it off very quickly to be like, oh, you're just being stupid, you know, you don't know any better. There's just so much more going on. It's very nuanced. And so parents need to be aware of their own influence and why a student or their kid might actually kind of step into that world in the first place.
Especially, I think, during the teenage years where friends are very much more influential than any adult figure could be. So I think acknowledging that and, you know, using that to your advantage as parents, maybe.
True, yeah.
Okay, so let's move on. So KFAM does host parenting classes from time to time. So, and I know you've been a part of a lot of them.
Yeah.
So could you maybe touch on what have you seen, is the biggest concern among parents regarding substances?
Yeah, so I would say, I do work a lot with immigrant parents, right? So they might not be as familiar with, you know, the English language or even American culture, whereas their children were born and raised in it potentially, right? And these things that they might not be as familiar with. So what I've kind of mostly encountered is a lot of parents just want to know the basic facts about these drugs. They understand enough about alcohol, but say something like marijuana, which would be considered like a Class A drug in Korea, for example, right? They don't know much about it besides you should never use it, right? They might not understand the nuances to the substance, right? The more specifics of it. For example, the chemicals that are inside. One of them is THC, which kind of creates the high feeling, versus CBD, which is a chemical that creates the relaxed feeling. You know, it's kind of not all marijuana products are created the same, and not all of them are necessarily addictive or necessarily super harmful to your child, but you have to be on the lookout to know the difference between those two, right?
Right. So, and I do remember from a past parenting class that you showed images of candy that had marijuana in it, but
it looks exactly the same.
You could not tell the difference between this regular bag of candy and this one that had marijuana in it.
Yep, no. They look almost identical.
Yeah.
The difference is minuscule. They copy the packaging colors, the fonts, so many things. It's crazy. So actually during one of my parenting classes, I realized that parents might not know the actual words they need to look for.
Right.
So I was teaching them to look for certain words that will be on packaging or labeling that indicates that marijuana is inside of it. So things like if it says THC infused or cannabis infused, that is a sign that likely it has, you know, marijuana infused inside the stuff. There are certain labels that also, you know, might have a number or label on it that indicates, again, this is a type of marijuana that will definitely like give your children like the lesser wanted effects, right? The more slightly potentially more dangerous effects of marijuana too. And I think it really helped to like spell it out in straight up English for these parents, you know, again, because these are kind of technical terms.
Right.
And these are terms that they might have not been exposed to, like, you know, in any other situation, especially maybe say, again, back in Korea.
Right.
So that's why I included that, just so, again, parents are also well equipped to deal with these situations when they come to it.
Just, I probably, if I took a look at both of them, I probably couldn't have told the difference. And I'm, you know, like 1.5 Gen. So, okay, so we do have a question in from Shin YH. It's a topic I need to talk to my kids about, but it's not easy to bring up, which I'm sure that's a lot of, that's, you know, sex and drugs probably is the most difficult topic for parents to tackle.
Yes.
So how would you, maybe some advice you would give to parents, like how to broach that subject?
Absolutely. So this is actually a topic that we talk about a lot in our parenting classes. You know, we don't just teach about drugs, right? In our parenting classes, we actually teach like basic relationship building skills, things like effective communication, how to like appropriately discipline children, because all these different factors will actually eventually tunnel down into how do you address drugs to your kid, right? And so the one thing I do say is that, yes, it's uncomfortable, but you have to power through, because more than anything, the earlier you start these conversations, the more impactful the words will be and the advice will be to your children as they grow up.
So then how early is early, would you say?
I would say any age, truly.
Any age.
I think the more that children are aware that substances are around them, because that's just reality. You cannot protect and like hide your child from substances forever. They will have it surround them eventually. So the earlier they know that this is something that they should say no to, that they know that this is bad for your health, helps them immensely. I would say, you know, obviously, like, I wouldn't wait until they were like 18. At that point,
that's just too late. I'm sorry.
That point, yeah, I know, like, they're a legal adult. What can you do? Like, yeah.
But it probably would be easier to talk about that subject when they're younger, as opposed to once they're entering into their teens. It's a little bit more difficult to start those conversations.
Absolutely. And, you know, you don't have to start with like, never do drugs. They're so bad for you. You can kind of ease your way into it, right? So for example, you know, I always tell parents that find a safe place to talk to your kid where both you and your child feel comfortable, right? So that might not be like over a table like this, talking to them very like, you know, direct eye contact. That can be kind of uncomfortable for your kid. Maybe say in the car, right? So you're driving, your kid is next to you or in the back seat. That could be a really great place to kind of slowly broach the topic. And you don't have to be like, are you using drugs, right? You can even say something like, hey, so, you know, how do your friends feel about drugs, you know? Or maybe if you're watching a TV show where someone is using substances, right? Even if it's like smoking a cigarette or drinking alcohol, maybe you can talk to your kids, especially if they're younger, point out to them, do you like how that person's acting? That's kind of like embarrassing, isn't it? Those little things add up to so much more by the time that they are, again, in control of their life and are able to make decisions independently.
Yeah, and then I think going back to the alcohol as well is that in Korea, the age limit is different.
Yes.
From Korea and here.
Right.
So I think maybe in some parents' minds, it's like, well, Korea, it's legal. What? It's okay, you know. So again, we can't stop them, but understanding the law, first of all, and then understanding the consequences of that is why I just wanted to bring up that little bit of cultural difference between Korea and here. Okay, so on to the next. As we enter into summer, is there any advice you could give to parents or kids for the summer break? They're home. They're going to be home 2 months.
Yes. No, actually, like, I was really happy when I saw, when I knew that you wanted to ask this question, because truth be told, actually, for about a third of people who have used substances, the first time they started using substances in the US at least was during summer.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
There's a lot of different reasons, obviously, just as there are so many different reasons why people even start getting into substances in the first place, right? but you do have a lot of free time,
Right.
right? It's a lot more time to spend with friends who might be using substances. And, it could be a time when, say, if the family home is a place where your child does not feel comfortable in, it might be a place where suddenly their anxiety might be building to a point where they don't know what to do anymore, right? So, again, as I mentioned before, parents, prevention truly does start with you guys.
Right.
What you do, the way that you treat your child, the way that you raise them, it truly does influence all their decisions. So for parents, I would say the biggest advice I would have is that make sure that you're able to build trust with your kid. And a lot of that comes down to spending good quality time with them. I know it doesn't seem like obvious parallels, but again, everything you do, all these little things,
It helps.
they really help. And so it might be just this really careful balance of not overexerting your kids. Maybe, take a little break from summer school. Just a little break, right? Go on a fun vacation together. Or maybe even set some time aside every day to maybe just ask your kid what's up with their life. You don't have to go deep. Just ask, how are you doing? And that might be all the difference, truly.
I think also, you kind of kept touching upon it, but sometimes it's the why. Why are they seeking out these substances? And so getting to the bottom of that can be very helpful as well.
Very much. So I would actually say, research has shown that it's about a 50-50 split. 50% is to kind of maintain a good feeling, right? So it's maybe if they're already having a really great time at, say, a house party and alcohol is there, they're like, well, I want to keep feeling great, so let's drink. But the other 50% is they want to cope with negative feelings. So they might use alcohol, marijuana, other substances as an escape from negative emotions they might be feeling inside. And of course, when I say to keep positive emotions continuing, to prevent or stop negative emotions, there's a multitude of smaller things underneath all of that too, right? Perhaps for the negative feelings, it's again, an unsafe home environment. Maybe it's bullying at school or ostracization from their peers, all these different things, yeah.
Okay. So I know that you do you go out into the community a lot. So let's say I don't know if we would do individual events, but if people are interested in having our SAPC department come out and maybe talk to a group of kids or, organization, how can they reach out?
So, of course, please make sure to, kind of follow us on all of our social media here at KFAM, as well as the social media account that we have for SAPC specifically, which is at KFAM_CAW. If you follow us there, we do post some PSAs, but we also post about events that are upcoming if you'd like to join us. Last year, we had a really great seminar about going back to schools and some anxieties parents might have, about sending their children off to a whole new stage of their education. And we also will post probably some more future events there too. You're also more than welcome to email us at sapc@kfamla.org. So that's CAPC@kfamla.org. So that's where we'll take in all of our general emails. So if you have any questions, even after this live stream has ended, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you guys have there.
Yeah. And again, we are located in LA. So if you're contacting us from somewhere else, it probably won't happen. But if you're within this vicinity, let us know.
Yes.
We can reach out. Okay, so I think we're almost there on time, but I guess maybe as a wrap up then, it sounds like the biggest thing to prevention is conversation.
It absolutely is. Conversation and trust, especially between a parent and child. For the child, it's trusting that their parent is doing everything they can to protect them, not, shelter them. And for the parent, it's trusting that their child is going to make healthy decisions in the future.
Okay, that's great advice. So let's say, what if you don't know if you have your kids' trust? I know that's a very big topic to get into.
Heavy. But you know what? I will say it's never too late to start building trust now. Yeah. As I said, sometimes it really is just a small question about how their life is going. And if your kid is kind of why are you asking me that suddenly, right? Just try and try again. Eventually, I think kids, they're all vulnerable. And truly, parents parents hold such a special place in their upbringing that there's no way, it'll always affect them in some way, right? So just keep on the habit, continue to try to reach out to them. And eventually, I think they're going to reach back and hold your hand. Yeah.
And I believe
Yes.
we are having an event in July with a couple of different departments for recent high school grads.
That is correct.
And if you're anxious about sending your kids to college for the first time, I think this might be a great event for you to check out, just so that, you know, kids, you prepare your kids educationally, but are they prepared for the other things about becoming an adult as well? So I think that's probably a great event to reach out to SAPC about, or just KFAM in general. So one last question from Judy Hong. 우리 아이가 4학년인데 술에 대해 친구들이 말한다고 하더라고요. 노래에서 drink 말이 나오는 노래 부르니요?
Oh, I see. Yeah, well, first off, I would like to say that's awesome that, you know, your child is talking to you about that in the first place and not trying to hide it from you. That's fantastic. I love to see that relationship. And I would say, yeah, unfortunately, as I said,
Fourth grade is a little young, but okay.
But substances are kind of prevalent in so many things of media that we've got, including songs.
Right.
So I'm sadly not very surprised that a fourth grader is exposed to pop music that references drinking. Unfortunately, I'm not going to say like stop your child from listening to all music. That's impossible, okay? At some point they're going to encounter this. But again, this is a great opportunity for you to talk to your child about why maybe drinking is not a really great healthy choice. Talk to them about why is it mentioned in the song? What's the context for it in the song? And I think that's just a great like shooting off point to discuss further about substances.
Yeah. So Judy, I think you're off to a great start that your kid is even talking to you about it. So good luck on that. Okay, so we're about to wrap up now. And I did want to mention that our next live stream will be Wednesday, June 25th. And we're going to be, not me, but Jennifer will be back and she'll be discussing with one of our mental health therapists about how to deal with rejection from college. I know a lot of people were dealing with that recently. So hope you join us for that. And if you enjoyed today's live stream, I hope that you'll please subscribe and like and turn on notifications so you can always know when we're on. And thank you for joining us. So that's it from us. So here we go.
Bye from KFAM.